Welcome back to Days of Our Lives. Hey everybody, this is Pastor Justin Walker with The Whole Truth, where we're going through the entire Bible from Genesis to Revelations. And no, it is not Days of Our Lives, but it sure seems that way. Genesis chapter 30 is the story today. We're going through Genesis right now, and it's Abraham, Isaac, Jacob. That's the fathers of our faith, in at least the Jewish faith, and then the Christian faith as well. Abraham had Isaac, Isaac had Jacob, and now Jacob was tricked. He tricked his dad, Isaac, but then he got tricked into marrying a woman that he didn't really want to marry, and then to marry the woman that he did want to marry. He had to work another 7 years. And so at this point, it's already mixed up because Jacob has one wife, which he doesn't really love, but he got tricked into taking. And then he has another wife, which he does love. It's been 14 years. The one wife that he did not love, she started having children. She had four children. Well, that made the wife that he did love jealous. Okay, so you've got this pretty wife that he loves. She's jealous of the wife that's not so pretty, but has 4 children. That's where we're picking up the story. It's Genesis 30, and it is a soap opera. Read this with me. Now, when Rachel saw that she bore Jacob no children, Rachel envied her sister and said to Jacob, "Give me children, or else I die." And Jacob's anger was aroused against Rachel, and he said, "Am I in the place of God, who has withheld from you the fruit of the womb?" So she said, "Here is my maid, Bilhah. Go into her, and she will bear a child on my knees, that I also may have children by her." Then she gave him Bilhah, her maid, his wife, as wife, and Jacob went in to her, and Bilhah conceived and bore Jacob a son. Then Rachel said, "God has judged my case, and he has also heard my voice and given me a son." Therefore she called his name Dan. And Rachel's maid Bilhah conceived again and bore Jacob a second son. And Rachel said, "With great wrestling I have wrestled with my sister, and indeed I have prevailed." So she called his name Naphtali. Oh my goodness. So here's Jacob. He already has 2 wives, one that he loves who's pretty but doesn't have kids, and she's jealous of the one who's not so pretty but does have 4 children. So she gets mad at Jacob and she says, "Give me children or else I die." Jacob says, "What more do you want me to do? I've only got one thing in this, all right? And so I can't help with anything else. I can try, but I'm not God." And she says, "Well, then I'll tell you what we'll do." And she pulls out the same thing that Jacob's grandmother had done. "Take my handmaid." Jacob's already got 2 wives, Leah and Rachel. Now, Rachel gives Jacob Bilhah. Well, Bilhah gets pregnant. Jacob obliges. He takes Bilhah. She gets pregnant not once, but twice. So now, Jacob has 6 children, but by 2 different women. All of them are his wife. He has 3 wives now. Now, some people would use the word concubine for Bilhah, and if you want to do that, that's fine. But the Bible said that she gave him as a wife. Okay, she gave Bilhah. Rachel gave Bilhah as a wife, and later he'll say something about his wives. And so we see wife. Well, look in verse 9. When Leah saw that she had stopped bearing, she took Zilpah, her maid, and gave her to Jacob as wife. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a son. Then Leah said, "A troop comes," and she called his name Gad. And Leah's maid Zilpah bore Jacob a second son. And then Leah said, "I am happy, for the daughters will call me blessed." And so she called his name Asher. Now let's just stop there for just a moment and recognize that now Leah, who already has 4 children, is now getting jealous of Rachel, who doesn't have any children by herself, but she has 2 surrogate children through her handmaid Bilhah. And so Leah, she realizes she's not having any more kids right now. So she gives Jacob her handmaid as a wife. Her name is Zilpah. So Rachel gave Bilhah, Leah gave Zilpah. Now this man Jacob has 4 wives. This last wife, Zilpah, now has 2 more children to Jacob. And both times Leah says she's excited about that. She's trying to act as if she's praising God. Notice that in that last verse, that when Leah gave those praises, notice what she said. She wasn't happy about the child. She wasn't excited that Jacob would love her like what we read before. No, all we see at this point is competition between the sisters. A commentator by the name of Barnhouse, he made a comment. He said, could a woman get so low that she would hit her sister over the head with her own baby? And she said, well, that's what Rachel and Leah did. They're in this competition. They're like fighting with each other. Who can have more children? Who can have more of Jacob? And they're kind of willing to do anything to do it. And this just goes to show, I told you yesterday in yesterday's video that this whole situation is a mess for Jacob. Well, let's look. The home situation is not good either in the midst of all this. And so verse 14, now Reuben went in the days of wheat harvest and found mandrakes in the field and brought them to his mother Leah. Then Rachel said to Leah, please give me some of your son's mandrakes. But she said to her, is it a small matter that you have taken my husband? Would you also take my son's mandrakes also? And Rachel said, therefore he will lie with you tonight for your son's mandrakes. Do you understand that the son Reuben comes home with mandrakes? Rachel wants some of the mandrakes. Reuben has brought the mandrakes to Leah. Rachel says, I want some of the mandrakes. And Leah says, why should I give you the mandrakes? You've taken my husband. Well, what happens with Rachel? She says, you can have Jacob tonight, but I want the mandrakes. So they trade the mandrakes so that Jacob will be with Leah for that night. Well, this is messed up. But look what happens. I'm in verse 15. When Jacob came out of the field in the evening, Leah went to meet him and said, you must come in to me, for I have surely hired you with my son's mandrakes. And he lay with her that night. Now, this is the part. Jacob went to Leah because she had bought him for the mandrakes. Here's the part where the story gets a little, where you have to start to dig a little theologically. Look at verse 17. And God listened to Leah, and she conceived and bore Jacob a fifth son. Leah, remember Leah had four before. The other two were from her handmaid Zilpah. So now Leah has another son. God gives her another son. And Leah says, verse 18, God has given me my wages because I have given my maid to my husband. And so she called his name Issachar. And then Leah conceived again and bore Jacob a sixth son. And Leah said, God has endowed me with a good endowment. And now my husband will dwell with me because I have borne him six sons. And so she called his name Zebulon. And afterwards she bore a daughter and called her name Delilah. Now read this, verse 22. Then God remembered Rachel. And God listened to her and opened her womb, and she conceived and bore a son and said, God has taken away my reproach. And so she called his name Joseph and said, the Lord shall add to me another son. Wow. 4 wives, 11 kids later. And we read in the middle of that, or really towards that latter part, and also in the beginning, we read that God heard Leah, and that God remembered Rachel. In the midst of all that they're doing, all that they're messing up, they're messing up their home life. I mean, messing it up big time. And yet God still heard them. God still remembered them. What we have right here is a lesson in this. God works in our lives many times in spite of what we're doing. Do you get that? God works in our lives not because he wasn't working. Leah said, God has heard me and he's blessing me because I have given my handmaid. God didn't say he was blessing her for that. No, God blessed her in spite of that. She didn't need to give her handmaid to Jacob. Rachel didn't need to give her handmaid to Jacob. The same as Abraham all those years ago did not need to give his handmaid Abraham did not need to take the handmaid of his wife Sarah. Now, all these years later, his grandson Jacob is making the same mistake, taking the handmaids of his wives. He shouldn't have 2 wives, but he does. He shouldn't take their maids as wife. Now he has 4 wives and 11 kids and a whole big mixed up home life. Okay, but God is still going to work through that. God still heard Leah, and he still heard Rachel, and God can work and will work. These sons become the 12 tribes of Israel. And God is going to work through them. He's going to call them his chosen people. He will choose them. And so what we see, I just want to end with this today. God did not choose them because of what they had done, but he chose them in his sovereignty and out of his mercy. God does not choose you and I because of what we have done. If you look at your life and go, well, I think I've been good enough. Remember when the rich young ruler came to Jesus and he said, what must I do to have eternal life? And remember what Jesus said? Well, you know the laws, you know what the prophet's saying, you know what the law said. And remember what he said? I have kept these from my youth. And then that's when Jesus had to say, well, there's one thing you're lacking. Sell everything you have and come follow me. And the man wouldn't do it because he had so much wealth. He went away sad. Do you remember that story? It's in the New Testament. If you don't, we'll get there. I mean, it might be a couple of years, but we'll get there. And so what I'm saying to you is this. If you're thinking I'm going to get to God on my works, it's never going to work that way. God doesn't choose us based on our works, but he offers us mercy based on his Son, based on his love, based on his character. We can rest in him knowing who he is. Now, that's not to say that Jacob's not going to pay for the consequence of his actions. This home life thing is not getting any better. It is going to continue to get worse because his life right now is not focused on serving the Lord, but his life right now is very fleshly, and he's lusting after the flesh, and he's gonna reap that. What you reap is what you're going to sow, and so he's not done reaping what he is sowing. But that doesn't mean that God is going to retract the blessing that he had promised to Abraham and to Isaac and then again to Jacob. God's not going to retract that because of what Jacob has done. And so rest in this, that God is not basing your salvation on you, but he's basing your salvation on his Son, Jesus. Have you put your faith in him? That's where you need to be. I hope you guys enjoyed today's video, and I'll see you tomorrow with more of Genesis chapter 30, and it keeps getting crazier. See you then.